Welcome to the Online Great Books podcast, brought to you by OnlineGreatBooks.com, where we talk about the good life, the great books, great conversation, and great ideas.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Online Great Books Podcast. This is Brett Veinotte. You might remember me from such episodes as Rules for Radicals Part 1. Scott, Karl, and I will pick up our discussion. We left off in the previous episode talking about the 13 tactics, and we're going to pick it up there today. The last conversation and this conversation overlap by about a minute, just so you can remember where we were at and what we were talking about before we move on. Thanks so much for continuing to listen, and we hope you enjoy the second part of the show. Take care. So with ridicule as man's most potent weapon 5, a good tactic is one your people enjoy, and a tactic that drags on too long becoming a drag. Trump is in this perfect situation in 2016 where he has 18 people to come up with nicknames for and make fun of and rip apart on stage, so it never gets old. Everybody loves it. And it's all based on ridicule. And then once all those people are out of the way, oh, what a joy. You still have Hillary Clinton to deal with. And everybody who supports Hillary Clinton in the media and Hollywood, you can go after all those people as well. So he just had like an absolute feeding frenzy in 2016. And there was a lesser example of it this year, but he had a lot of people to poke fun of, at least up until a few months ago in the Democrat candidate pool.
A tactic that drags on too long becomes a drag. Occupy Wall Street was doomed from the minute they pitched their tents. What are they going to do? Are they going to do that for 39 years? Can't do it. It's unsustainable. It was going to be a drag, 3 days in, but certainly when the snow starts falling, it was destined to not work. I don't even know if it's a footnote now, Occupy Wall Street.
Right. The banana peels that we've been talking about is also an example of this. If the media favors salaciousness and clicks and views over maybe more of a consistent long-term strategy, they're going to go with the racist labels, the sexist, misogynist, all of these accusations. And all of these words at this point, like words that should be powerful and should mean something and should speak to some kind of behavior that is a problem, usually, it just means nothing.
That's the other.
Calling somebody a rapist is basic, or a racist or a rapist, are like they just have no potency anymore.
Yeah, that's the other kind of drag, right? For the people at Occupy Wall Street, camping in the park became a drag. It's just a hard way to live. They couldn't keep up the political pressure in that way. The other way something can become a drag is if you push that tactic to the point that it's meaningless or it just simply doesn't work anymore. And at this point, you're going to get name called for virtually anything you do if somebody decides that you're a political opponent at this point. So that's starting to not work. My dad told me one time, He said, listen, son, we went to the NCO club for a beer. And I said, hey, should we call Mom and tell her we're going to be late? He said, no. Because if you call her and tell her you're going to be late, you can get your ass chewed out now. And then when you get home, you'll get another one. So let's just take one. Let's just take one ass chewing. So that's brilliant.
He's a deep thinker.
Yeah. So, if you're going to get your ass chewed out and get name called, and it's just an inevitability, eventually that just doesn't work anymore. It's not an exact corollary. I just want to tell a story. But eventually it doesn't work anymore. But they've been name-calling with those 3 or 4 different epithets now for heavy duty for about 5 years. And it's people are starting to not care. That disinterested, have a little, want more group is starting to not care.
Well, the evidence for that is that the accusations you have to make need to go up. They need to get magnified.
Right.
And so now all of a sudden, there's Nazis everywhere.
Right.
Are you kidding me? There's probably 10 Nazis in the United States.
Right.
Like actual Nazis. And maybe 50. But now everybody that you disagree with is a full-on literal Nazi.
I don't even see, and that's the thing. If you say encyclopedia enough, it just sounds like gibberish. You say these things enough and they just don't even mean anything anymore.
What'll be next after that? After that word no longer has any meaning.
Well, it has no. If you can call an Orthodox Jew a Nazi.
Yeah, Ben Shapiro's a Nazi or whatever. He's like, what are you talking about? Russian spy. They did that one for a little while. The name calling in that way is probably over. They're going to have to probably do what Trump does and call you a specific name that fits you, Brett.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
What a shame about their abuse of the Russian stuff in the media too, because the Russians are up to something, and now no one's going to believe it.
Right.
Media ruined that.
What are they up to, Brett Veinotte?
It's a topic for another show.
What are they up to? Let's start that show right now.
Rule number 8. Keep the pressure on. The major premise for tactics is the development of operations that will maintain a constant pressure upon the opposition. It is this that will cause the opposition to react to your advantage.
That's self-evident.
Doesn't he talk about Patton, I think, in the book?
Patton and Sherman both, yeah.
That the strategy was to never stop advancing, because once you stop advancing, you give the enemy a chance to dig in. And these guys, I think Patton in particular, but these guys that had seen World War I and seen what happened when you didn't advance, and then you dug the trench, and then you're just spending bodies, spending lives, going over the top in the machine guns, is never, ever going to do that. So you never stop the attack. You never give your opponent a chance to revamp the message, to think clearly. If you keep attacking, they can't think clearly. In the words of the great philosopher Mike Tyson, everybody's got a plan till he get punched in the face. Yep. So you keep punching him in the face so you can't make a plan.
Here's the Patton speech. He says, we're not holding anything. Let the Hun do that. We're advancing constantly. We're not interested into holding on to anything except the enemy. We're going to hold on to him by the nose. We're going to kick him in the ass. We're going to kick the hell out of him all the time. It's patently obvious. Like, why would you let up? If you're right and they're wrong, why would you let up?
Caution, fear.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah. Sensibility again, decorum.
Morality.
Oh, pshaw. That old thing?
Yeah, that's so last year.
That's so 1100 AD.
Number 9, he doesn't give a lot of information. It just says, the threat is usually more terrifying than the thing itself.
I think this is important for someone who is being subjected to an Alinsky-style attack to realize. So if you're Brett Veinotte and you're pro-homeschooling, and a bunch of anti-homeschoolers who are anti-parental authoritarianism activists call you a fascist, you might worry about them painting you with that brush, but, your hamburger will still taste good this evening, and your girlfriend will still be all right, and everything's okay. Worrying about these threats is probably a much bigger problem than actually dealing with them. Yeah, Karl, there are anti-parental authoritarianism activists out there.
I'm sure they're out there. Some of these things I don't think work quite the same these days. Number 9, I don't know. I mean, when you see people showing up at your door, beating you up, the battles that have gone on in Portland between Antifa and the Proud Boys. What's the guy's name? Andy?
NGO?
NGO, how do you pronounce that?
Non-governmental organization.
I've seen the video of him getting just clubbed in the head.
Right.
The threat might actually not be as terrifying as the reality. They surrounded Tucker Carlson's house. Right. People are starting to think about embracing violence in a real active way.
So is this the natural conclusion? Alinsky, in this book, he's really interested in making sure that the rank and file people in his organizations don't run afoul of the law and get arrested, mostly. He talks about a bathroom clog up campaign for the Chicago O'Hare Airport, where they were just going to have a bunch of people to show up and occupy all the bathrooms so people that got off the planes wouldn't have anywhere to relieve themselves, and thereby just disrupt the largest airport in the world. And he said, that's not illegal. How do you judge whether somebody had sat on the toilet too long? Maybe they needed to. So he's really interested in that. But he's so slippery with the means and ends. He talks about improvising and taking what opportunities come, and the end is the most important thing. I mean, that's the natural conclusion, right? Is you eventually beat the shit out of one of your opponent's children.
Yeah, if it works, why not? That's the big question. Why not? If you've already disclaimed any sort of old-fashioned morality that tells you not to beat up children, well, why not beat them up?
Brett laughed at that. Why'd you laugh about that?
The way it was said was... It did not generate any visual that I enjoyed. It was the way that Karl said it.
You thought of a particular kid, didn't you?
No.
Oh, I did.
No.
You don't have a list? You're not like that guy from, what was it, Billy Madison?
No.
Seriously, chapter 2, which is about means and ends and means, if you don't have a hard stop somewhere in your consideration of potential means, it's tactical nuclear warheads under the hood of your opponent's car. Nothing's off the table.
Mm-hmm.
The Irish Republican Army used to blow people up pretty regularly, and for the most part got what they wanted. Does that justify the means? It's the way of the world, and I hate that it's the way of the world, that you could have any means necessary, and if you win, it suddenly becomes good.
Is it a new way of the world?
No, it's not new. I think probably we are ill-poised to, I don't know. I think it's been a problem for 3,000 years trying to figure out what justice is. What are the limits? Are there any limits? Where are we going to find them? You can't find justice in a microscope. So you either say it doesn't exist, or you make up some stories, or you cling to religion. Maybe it's even a true religion, who knows? But you find someplace that's not tangible. And then your opponents can always mock you, or they can use the rules against you, and you lose. Are you okay with losing? Let's flip it that way. If you don't like Alinsky's tactics, then I have to say, are you okay with losing?
I'm not.
Yeah, it's getting to be less and less okay to lose to this march.
Yeah, so does that change your tactical considerations? What way would you do this? There's tactics that he uses that would not work right now. So we're talking about the people being canceled. All of the interesting people, well, at least on one side of the political equation, have been canceled.
Lots of people have disappeared. Yep.
Yeah.
Twitter's a graveyard.
You can't find them. There are links. If I try to send them to you in a Facebook message, it will say I can't send it to you.
Yeah, not even radical stuff. Zero Hedge, which is just mostly economic and business news. You can't
the most depressing website in the world.
From Zero Hedge.
People have sent me screenshots of trying to do this with certain parts of School Sucks. They say this can't be shared. It violates something.
The tactics of the world is watching don't work because the world's not watching, because the world generally watches the Facebook feed.
Right.
So in what way can you make the world watch? If you hold a homeschool conference and it gets thousands and thousands of people to show up, but nobody reports on it, go back to every year for the last, this might touch close to home for some people, but I don't care. This is just a political point. The March for Life in Washington every year is an enormous event. Okay, so it's anti-abortion advocacy march. It's huge. Fills up the mall, never gets any coverage. So it might as well not even happen. What's the point in going? If that's an issue dear to you, why even go to that march? Because nobody sees it.
Or it can be reconstructed in the media as something else, like all of these things can be.
Yeah.
You know Hambrick's theory about nonviolent protest.
I do.
Nonviolent protest. You go down and you march on the main mall, and then you go home and you're like, man, I sure feel good about myself. And it lets that political tension off. It's a pressure release. And I would think that if I was a politician, I would just love it because I don't really have to do anything. And everybody blows off a little bit of steam, and then I can just keep on trucking on. What I'm really worried about is ropes on the lamppost, like in the French Revolution where they're hanging the people in power from lampposts in the street.
Okay.
What was her name? Lafarge? If they could have got her to run a march
Oh, they'd have loved it.
Then there would have never been a French Revolution.
You're saying this has a decompressing effect. Like when I was a part of the Free State Project in New Hampshire, there was a lot of debate over the legalization of marijuana. Because it's like, if marijuana gets legal, a bunch of people right now who are agitated, so this is pure tactics talk that was going on there, a bunch of people who are relatively agitated and feeling disempowered or disenfranchised, really, like this is a lifestyle that, this is a part of my lifestyle and it's illegal. Once that's gone, we lose those people because all of their energy comes from that. But then there's the other question of like, how useful are those people anyway? So but it's the same kind of idea. It's like if you can turn that valve and say, here, people, have this concession legally, or have your march. What did Alexander Haig say? Let them march all they want as long as they pay their taxes. He was Reagan's chief of staff, maybe.
Right. You guys are a bummer.
I'm sorry, but I'm thinking, what are the tactics that would work?
Well, we've talked about at Online Great Books, we buy a little bit of Facebook advertising. We have this podcast and the Music and Ideas podcast, and we kind of get the message out about our program on those things. We have an email list that is pretty large, and we send out newsletters and information to people that we hope is helpful, and we hope that we help them so much that they feel bad about not joining us, and they join. I worry though a little bit about getting deplatformed.
Online Great Books, really.
Yeah. All they need to say is, we're homeschooling radicals, or, I don't know. But if you've got a business, you really need to consider this because it's an existential threat. You need to have, what's our plan for backing our computers up if the building burns? Probably not going to burn, but you need to think about it. Well, what happens if we're not able to syndicate our show on iTunes at School Sucks Project? What do we do? What's plan B, C, D? And Karl and I have talked about this. And then there's another piece of this, which is advertising or marketing in an increasingly noisy Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, etc., is less effective every day.
Yep.
So let's say we're not deplatformed. Let's just say that we just decide that Facebook is so noisy and it's just not working for us anymore. Well, then what do you do? So we've talked about it a lot, and I think about it all the time. And I keep coming back to we're going to end up with these older marketing styles. Glad-handed people, trade shows, whatever. Door to door.
You can't shake hands anymore, Scott.
More grassroots. Right.
Shaking hands is against the law.
I think that the political is going to end up being that as well.
How so?
Yeah, you have to go around the gatekeepers.
Well, if you have a political message that's outside of the norm, Facebook will shut it down.
Yeah, right.
Even if you're just zero hedge and you're just weirded out by the price of oil, no, you can't talk about that. So what do? They don't have any other choice but to make it very personal and to reach people one at a time, twos at a time, fives at a time. And maybe that's not as efficient as getting 10,000 Twitter followers and just boom, getting a message in front of them. But what's your choice? You have to do what you can do. Alinsky tells you that.
And maybe each person reached, they get kind of a job. It's voluntary, obviously, but like, hey, why don't you go pass this along to 5, 10 people, share this.
If you're a labor organizer in the late 1920s, the early 1930s, you don't own the printing presses and the barrels of ink. There is no Twitter. There is no, what do? You've got to go where they are. You've got to speak to those people. You have to make compelling arguments that appeal to their personal experience. You have to give them a call to action that they're willing to do, that they'll find fun and is sustainable, and organize them. Here's what we organize for. We organize to get people to read these books and think. Everything's a conspiracy, Brett. We conspire every day to try to figure out how to get one more dude to go read one of these books,
Mm-hmm.
And we're just going to have to, I think it's going to be, it's just going to be grassroots. It's like Yogi Berra, nobody goes there anymore. It's too crowded. Like Facebook and stuff's too crowded. Like, how can you be heard? We're going to have to go where it can be personal. And podcasts are a lot of that, right? This is very personal. You might get 1 million downloads if you get a huge show, but it's still very personal. You're in somebody's earbuds. You're inside their head, It's still very personal. And if we lose the ability to syndicate these shows to these big outlets, Google Play, Stitcher, so on, we're still going to have to make it the personal. there won't be any choice, and that'll be slow, and that'll be frustrating, and people will come around to our conspiracy of reading Homer by dribs and drabs. But what are you going to do?
Yeah, what's evidenced in this kind of a book is a lack of patience. This is really about people who lack patience. What we're trying to do, as collective as our efforts are, requires a lot of patience. And when it comes to school, I don't have any designs on reforming the public school system or what should be done with vouchers or what's the story with charter schools. It's like, hey, pretty sure this thing that we're complaining about is a sinking ship. So we'll go by in a lifeboat, get in if you want. We don't have room for everybody anyway, right? Like, this is just not going to be accessible to most people. I don't love saying it, but I agree with Alinsky and even Bernays that most people are just not going to do this work. And I don't know how that changes. I don't know when that changes, but maybe if that's been a constant for thousands of years, and this has been an observation in philosophy going back to ancient Greece. Now, obviously, the world of today is much different, and a revolution could happen very quickly, but I'm not holding out for that, for some kind of mass conversion to rationality.
But what do you do? What do your tactics become if Elizabeth Bartholet
gets her way,
and there's talk of a presumptive ban? It's been passed out of committee, and it's 2021, and it looks like it's going to pass the Senate, and it's going to get the president's signature. Now what do you do? That's a real possibility.
Do you really think that's a possibility? Because I don't know. I see...
What I'm thinking is the schools are where you get people discontented enough to push the needle.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm Alinsky, I need the schools. He talks about the colleges, but, I don't know what they're going to do if they don't go back to college. That's where you mine the discontent to get the political changes you want. And they're in a bad way right now. I think if a certain administration got in, I think absolutely they'd push for a ban. If they thought it would pass, they'd pass it today. There's a real danger because you're a threat. All these people at home teaching their kids, how much percentage does it take for them to say, hey, I like this, before it's a tipping point?
Here's what we can see in action. A handful of people led by this guy I mentioned, Corey Deangelis, who, even though I said his tactics are not the same as mine, every screenshot he posts gets a like from me for what it's worth. It's worth very little. But I admire what he's doing. I admire and understand the need for some kind of division of labor there. But he went to war, right, in a way that Saul Alinsky would have been very proud of. And that's nothing against Corey. But he organized a counter event, coordinated with the Harvard Kennedy School of Government, right? As soon as he started pressing it, Harvard canceled their event. So the bigger picture story is Bartholet wrote that paper last year. Obviously, now there's a lot of discussion about the future of education versus kids being schooled or maybe, for a few, educated at home, right? Basically, we don't have homeschooling. We just have like quarantine schooling happening right now. But people see school and home, and they call that homeschooling.
It's It's only a quarantine if you're sick. It's a lockdown.
Thank you. Right. But people smash those words together because people are in home and people are schooling. And this is like a great way to destroy interest in an educational alternative, since it's tied up with, trauma and worry and anxiety and people having to adjust to something new. So that's homeschooling. It's discomfort and inconvenience, everybody. We're going to call that homeschooling. But obviously, there's like a lot of media attention right now on this, and the Washington Post articles like homeschooling will set back a generation of kids, and all of those media outlets have jumped on these things.
Well, how would you organize?
So all of this attention came on this. It took like a handful, one guy in his Twitter following and a handful of supporters to push back enough to a point where they wouldn't even go forward with their anti-homeschooling event that they were going to host at Harvard.
But they still win. This is right out of Alinsky and the propaganda book. So Harvard and Bartholet and her camp, whoever those people are following Alinsky's playbook. I'm sorry, Bernays' playbook. We're going to anoint some experts. We're going to publish some stuff. We're going to have a conference. The conference will further publish some stuff. We'll put out press releases, sympathetic media outlets. We'll quote from the experts in the literature, which we created. And then we're going to start a conversation in the public, and we're going to start to move the opinion needle this way or that based on manufactured consensus, really.
Right.
So,
and they got shut down at the conference part.
No.
So
yes. And no. Yes. But Alinsky would say, okay, they got 20% of what they wanted. It's a win. They wanted to have the conference, but what they did do is they put in a bunch of people's minds who were already apathetically inclined towards homeschooling. They put the idea in their mind that perhaps parents could be authoritarian, that children who are homeschooled can be abused, and no one would ever know about it because they're never outside of the home, and no disinterested person could report on abuse for those children. So all of these issues that Bartholet brings up got put in front of the people that were on the fence maybe about homeschooling, but might get shoved off on the other side. Now,
right.
Your friend Karl.
But it also had the effect of charging up people who, like, a lot more people are sympathetic to this, right, than there used to be anyway. And that's been a development over the last 10 years, really, since the rollout of Common Core. And I would say more people have become supportive of it, going all the way back to No Child Left Behind. But
you're right.
All of the people who already supported it are stirred the way Alinsky, these people who might have at one time benefited from the tactics and the message of Alinsky are now almost like stirring everything the wrong way for themselves, right?
Well,
because it's like, look at these idiots again. Look at what they're trying to do. And then there can be this pile-on led by a passionate pro-homeschool person who says, here's a bullshit argument, here's another bullshit argument, here's another bullshit argument. Everybody can understand that these are shallow, meaningless arguments. The people who don't understand that are making a choice not to understand that because they read, Vox or Salon or Slate or the Washington Post or the New York Times. So that's all that was done was to insert into an echo chamber. I get that there might have been people who go, oh, yeah, this really confirms a lot of my concerns about homeschooling. I'm glad Harvard was doing this because people need to know. But they were already firmly in the camp of anti-homeschooling, spend more taxpayer money on government school. I get what you're saying, but I'm saying these people are also, even with their 20% victory, they're just like firing bullets into their feet as well.
But the organizer doesn't care so much about what you do until he gets his base organized. They are organizing their base. They now have conflated homeschooling with the word authoritarian. Step one.
Mm-hmm.
I'm telling you, we're not going to win this because all they do is move the ball forward step by step by step and boil the frog.
Well, you won't win it if you don't do anything.
And we're like, well, we won 80% of that fight. They won the most crucial part of that fight, which was to paint homeschooling parents as authoritarian. The next step is they're Nazis. And once you got that, you can commit violence against them. I'm telling you, it's not good. And and maybe they didn't have the conference. They didn't fucking care if they had the conference or not. That was icing on the cake. Shutting down the conference got everybody to talk about the paper. Brett, not everybody's as smart as you are.
Is that a good thing or is that a bad thing?
It's a bad thing.
The paper is a disaster. I would be horrified if I was an academic and everybody was scrutinizing that paper that I wrote.
But it's a piece of rhetoric. It's just designed to conflate authoritarianism with homeschooling. That's it. Nothing else matters. Facts, nothing else matters.
No, you're right. The headline in the abstract is all that anybody who reported on it probably read. Because it came from an academic at Harvard, right? So I get that there's that amplification. So then I guess it's just this balance of what does the counter response count for there?
Well,
go ahead. Sorry, Karl.
You have to figure out what are the right tactics. The goal would be the preservation or even the expansion of this better form of education. Okay?
I have the tactic. You'll have to cut this out, Brett.
But you have to figure out which tactics would work, which tactics are effective. And I don't know. I mean, homeschoolers are a fizzy Paris lot. We want to stay home. We're like disorganized by nature.
Yep.
We all do it for different reasons. Wouldn't join a club that would have me as a member. I don't know what the tactics are. I hope you guys figure it out.
The tactic is to paint people who want to control your children as perverts. That's the tactic. It's distasteful. You're like, Bartholet wants your fucking kid. Why?
Yeah.
Why do they want your kid? A certain number of kids have terrible home lives. That's true. Why does she want your kid who doesn't have a good home life? You go paint them as perverts. That's how you do this. That's how you wreck this, guys. Now, are we willing to do it?
They did this to my church. Okay? The rates of, and gosh, I know some of these guys and it pisses me off too. So the real hell of it was that they were right. There are priests that have done bad things.
Yep.
Damn it. The hell of it is that it's true. And then they used it and they leveraged it. And now, Catholic Church in America is dead as a moral force. They just don't know it.
Yep.
Completely destroyed through these tactics.
And the public school system is far more pedophilic than any other organization that is currently in operation.
Well, yeah, there's that. Okay, so there's that part of it, but even if you want to remove just a little bit of precision there, like pedophile, that's very specific, and say exploitative, then you have so many more examples to introduce. Like putting kids on, like drug dealing to kids.
Pedophile, though, is the equivalent, on the right, is the equivalent of Nazi as a term on the left. If you paint somebody as a pedophile, you can cut their fucking throat and have a moral mandate to do it. If you're on the right. I know rednecks from Mays County, Oklahoma, that would feed pedophiles to the hogs all day, every day. Sleep like a baby.
Well, I'm sorry if my presence here made this not the most constructive episode of Online Great Books. I hope I wasn't responsible.
No, I don't know how much of all of that we're going to keep.
Probably none of it, but that's the tactic.
Yeah.
I'm telling you, that's the winner. That's the money shot.
Well, I think ridicule generally, and one of the things that we talked about much earlier in this conversation is it's something people can be so creative with today. Look at the ridicule being applied to this current situation that is obviously for a lot of people like COVID-19, anxiety-inducing. People are still finding ways to polarize and make fun of the things they don't like, and some of it is hilarious. I have this beautiful wag the dog meme that I'm working on that I'm hoping to do a whole series of these over the next month because there's some really bizarre, contrived things going on in this whole narrative. But there's endless possibility for creativity with ridicule today. And there is something, I think it puts me in that, I don't know, apathetic middle group to say, no, not those tactics. Those aren't the right. I went through this in New Hampshire, right? Being a part of this free state, which is a libertarian movement for people who are completely unfamiliar. This was something I was very into 10 years ago. So people would move from all over the country, if not the world, to New Hampshire to enact political change once they reached the tipping point, which they thought would be 20,000 signers. With 2,000 people in the state, they were making quite a scene, but it was a group of maybe 100, 150 people in one town who were doing civil disobedience, and they were have-nots. They were basically people who had nothing to lose, who saw other people like annoying cops and annoying pearl-clutching citizens on YouTube videos, and they said, that's what I like to do. I like to annoy people and videotape it, so I'm going to go there. And it turned out to be a disaster. But the movement broke apart, or that part of the movement, I would say, the Free State Project is still a thing. And in some places, there's really impressive people who are like family, homeschoolers, entrepreneurs. But that scene fell apart because these people had tactics, and people in the middle who had some wanted more went, we're not a part of this. We can't do this. This is not what's, they were basically shamed for behaving that way. Mm-hmm. So I don't want to do that, but there's also like things that are just not good optics that I don't want to participate in.
I get it.
Just happened with all these lockdown protests. Like there are things going on in Michigan and New Hampshire. It's just not a good look. If the goal is outreach, if the goal is winning hearts and minds,
these people marching with guns are absolutely insane.
You feel that way?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. So in this world, like the difference between our world and his world is optics mattered a lot less.
Yeah.
Because things were not as optical then. Everything is today.
The optics on the gun thing. We've all heard the gun safety rule. Never point a gun at something you don't want to destroy.
Yep.
Well, here's a corollary to that. Never bring a gun if you're not going to use it.
Yeah.
And so when they bring the gun and then the police turn them away and they lay the gun on the ground and they lay down, they're showing that there's really no willingness to do anything. And I'm not saying anybody should shoot anybody. They would be better off if they didn't bring the gun, they got arrested, and they say the whole world is watching.
Yeah, I think that's right.
It's a sign of weakness to show up with the thing and then not use it. Again, I'm not saying use it. They don't have any intention to do it. They don't have any intention to use it. I get that. But don't advertise that you're not going to do it, which is what they're doing.
Right.
Well, that's what was that, Rule 9? The threat usually more terrifying than the act. You don't show people that your threat's not actually that much.
Right. And because these are nice people with families and stuff, they're showing up and doing that, and they're LARPing and whatever, man. I get it.
They're unorganized.
But they're unorganized.
They're unorganized. They need to think about tactics. The best tactic is the one that's going to be effective. That's why we were doing the thought experiment about the homeschooling. What tactic would work? I think you could do the infectious disease tactic for a while.
Oh, don't send your kids to school because you don't want them to die of the boomer flu.
Yeah, it's not something, I don't like that tactic.
I like it. It'll work.
I mean, I don't think it's I'm not sure it's the reality, is what I'm saying. I don't think it's truthful. However, it would work.
Well,
germ awareness has been raised, right?
Yeah.
By this whole thing. So it's not like if your kid goes to school, they're going to get this thing and get sick. But those are the dirtiest places I've ever been in.
Yes.
Schools. Now, sure, there's a whole separate argument there about what should a person's exposure to germs be.
I want to eat my own dirt. I don't want to eat somebody else's dirt.
But there's lots of openings when it comes to problems with school, right? There's lots of options there.
Gentlemen, I've just realized we haven't finished these rules.
No. Should we do 11, 12, 13?
Let's bust through them.
10 and 8 are very similar. 8 being keep the pressure on. 10, major premise for tactics is the development of operations that will maintain a constant pressure upon the opposition, right? Those are very closely related. 11, if you push a negative hard and deep enough, it will break through to its counter side. This is based on the principle that every positive has its negative. So it's kind of reversing that. Mm-hmm. And I think we talked about that at the beginning of the show with the Chicago protests in 19. If I'm understanding that correctly, getting beat up by the police is a negative until you optically convert it to a positive.
He seems to think that there's like a continuum in power, and that like he gave an example about the new United States. They passed the Constitution, ratified the Constitution, put that thing in place, and we had Shays' Rebellion almost instantly. Then the United States federal government cracked down on all manner of civil liberties almost instantly. He talked about in India, Nehru made hunger strikes illegal almost instantly upon nationhood status and the overthrow of the British colonial government. Whatever was positive will end up being negative as well. Like, he sees it both ways, and he gives example after example. And here's the thing I thought. There was a counterculture movement in the 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, and 60s that we can see clearly in our mind when we think of the Vietnam War anti-war protesters. I think in hindsight, almost everybody would agree that they were right, that the Vietnam War was unjust, farcical, wasteful, cruel, anything you can think of. There's almost nothing good about it. I don't know what the heck it would be. I'd have to really sit down and think really hard to find something good about it. So that group of people has pushed and pushed and pushed and pushed and pushed to the point that they are the ones in power now. So to some degree, their playbook won't work anymore because they're in power. Because This is about transgressing existing power structures. So at this point, us right-wing rednecks from Oklahoma are punk rock.
Yep.
Now what? I don't know.
Okay, so you make the nerds become the cool kids if you push it long enough.
Well, that never happens. Revenge of the Nerds didn't happen. That never happens.
It could just be a way to think about tactics, is that if you are stuck in a negative situation and you push on it long enough, you can figure out a way to make it a positive. So Gandhi, we don't have any guns. We can't fight the British. So we'll fight them without guns because we have to. you take your negative and make it a positive.
Okay.
I don't
Sure.
know that it's magical. I think you could just, So like we were talking earlier, anybody interesting gets canceled. How do you take that and make it a positive?
You got canceled.
If you get canceled, you're edgy.
People saying, watch this video before it gets banned. Every time it goes up, it gets banned. I'm like, it might be. So there was this video called Plandemic. This was last week, right? Movies using copyrighted music. YouTube just runs an algorithm against any video that gets uploaded that takes down videos using copyrighted music. So it's almost like you get this credibility with whatever truther community you're a part of. And, I'm not saying it's not okay to be a part of some of them, but this video, it almost seemed like it was using that as a strategy. It gets banned everywhere it goes, and people associate getting banned with being the truth.
That's a good Alinsky-style strategy.
Yeah, that's Rule 10 or Rule 11, right?
Karl, let's do that. Mm-hmm. When we do our truther video, we're going to put Thriller, Michael Jackson's Thriller. Nobody's speaking over it, nothing. And then we're going to scream that they banned us and how unfair everything is. It's going to be, that's a good tactic. I like it.
Yep. 12 is worded kind of strangely. Maybe you guys can help me make sense of this one. The price of a successful attack is a constructive alternative.
Yeah, if you were protesting the government schools, which isn't what you want to do, you're like, we just don't want to do, we want to do our own thing. But let's say you were protesting it, and then all of a sudden they agree with you.
Mm-hmm.
It's like a rope-a-dope strategy.
They feign agreement.
Well, maybe they actually agree with you. Maybe you've convinced them. And they say, okay, what would you do? You better have an answer.
You must have, the price that you have to pay when you win is you have to have a constructive alternative.
Okay, so when you're successful, you have to have, that makes sense.
I had to read this 10 times, Brett. I'm just like, this is weird wording here.
Well, it's a game you play with if you ever have friends with whom you can have, and who has these friends anymore, with whom you can have an honest political debate. And you say, fine, you win. What do you get? What do you do?
Yep.
Pin them down on numbers. Well, I don't have numbers. I don't know. Well, then you weren't serious.
Right. So he understands the subjectivity of this, right? Because what constructive is totally in the eye of the beholder. So even if somebody's just feigning agreement or feigning resignation going, well, all right, what's the answer then? Because how many times has that happened to me on this topic in my life? I don't know, 1,000. Right. Mm-hmm. I've had that conversation with someone go, well, what would you do? And I said, why would I be so psycho to think that I could plan education for millions of children that I haven't even met? Oh, dodge, you got no plan. Because the subjective analysis from that person is you need to have a plan as good as the psychos who control my children right now.
Yeah, because we all know the truth is that doing nothing would be better.
My plan is not to have a plan.
Brilliant. He also talks about that too. Let's go to Rule 13. This is
Rule
the
13.
one. Why is it Rule 13?
I love this one. In that, again, that it's written and it's something we get to talk about. Pick the target, freeze it. No, and actually, this is, as somebody who's interested in possibly changing the status quo, I think this is really important. Pick the target, freeze it, personalize it, and polarize it. So from the book, it actually says, it should be borne in mind that the target is always trying to shift responsibility to get out of being the target. As far as our purposes, this could be public school, Department of Education, meddling academics who are writing about this from a legal perspective. There is a constant squirm, but it is from Alinsky's perspective, it was usually government agencies or corporations. There is a constant squirming and moving and strategy, purposeful and malicious at times, other times just for straight self-survival on the part of the designated target. The forces for change must keep this in mind and pin that target down securely. If an organization permits responsibility to be diffused and distributed in a number of areas, attack becomes impossible. So, Trump's swamp, the swamp is made a character. It's a one thing. Even if there is not one person that you could attack, having this collective that is just called the swamp itself becomes a kind of character.
he has made a mistake here, at least in the Alinsky school. The swamp is good rhetoric.
Mm-hmm.
It freezes the issue.
It freezes it. That's
freezes
it.
the issue, but there's no target. There's no way he can win and make good on the promise to drain the swamp because he didn't actually pick the target.
I see. That's where I might disagree, because then it's up to the Trump supporter to pick the target once Trump makes an attack, right? So it's some part of government that's like hostile to Trump. So Peter Strzok or Schiff
Shifty.
or Comey, right? If one of these people goes down or at least gets attacked by Trump, he goes, oh, there it is, drain the swamp. Then it's like that idea that everybody's comfortable with gets applied to that person who's obviously in the swamp. Why would Trump attack them? He's here to, if he wasn't in the swamp, Trump's here to drain the swamp.
I hear what you're saying. By keeping it open-ended, he can claim victory when all kinds of things happen.
Yeah, exactly.
But
that's the idea.
But I think if you actually want stuff to happen, he needs to pin the tail on that donkey and be more specific about it. And I think that he's in a perfect situation right now to actually say it is the FBI or it is the Justice Department. He's in a perfect situation right now to say, it's a many-headed hydra, the swamp, but here are a few of their heads.
Yeah, I think he did it again, like with Mexico, right at the beginning of his campaign.
Redheads Mexicans. That's what I just heard.
It worked with the wall.
Are you using Rule 13 on him?
Yeah.
Yeah, they're not sending their best. That's become a part of our language. I say that to when a box shows up at my house and it's dented from Amazon. I love saying that.
That's hilarious.
It's a great line. So they're not sending their, and then there's this one lack of clarity on the word there. Right? Where he says they're these bad guys, they're these bad guys, they're these bad guys. Pause. They're rapists. Now, is it THEIR? Their rapists are also being sent, or THEY''RE? Is he calling Mexicans rapists, right? So we don't know. I don't know. I need to see a transcript of that speech, but he creates this great question that polarizes the entire country into two camps on that issue right there, right in that speech. It's genius. Mm-hmm. And instead of how much wiggle room or how many escape hatches are there for bureaucrats on the immigration issue? Right? And how much blame is there to go around? Like Republicans who are, helping out corporations and trying to get cheap labor into the country, and then the Democrats who might be doing it for more social. How many people could be said to be responsible for, and it just becomes this noise. I'll blame a whole country. I'll say they're sending these people here.
Well, I would go farther. I would blame a hemisphere. Do you think Trump has read this and made a study of it?
I don't know.
Do you think he listened to the audiobook? The idea of him sitting down and reading a book is, I'm not sure about that.
I think Bannon probably has read it.
Sure.
And I think Stephen Miller has probably read it. I think the people advising him are at least familiar. I think the book has been summarized for him.
I think if you're an observant participant in modern politics, I think you're going to get most of this stuff by osmosis. It's the way things have been done. If you read this book, dear listener, you're going to recognize all of this stuff. It's all the stuff that happens.
This is an emergent system that Alinsky just wrote down, right? This is what happens.
Yeah, and I've been chuckling well, there's a few things. I like all of Brett's voices. When he's doing somebody else, his voice changes. That's been fun to listen to. But, it's like you're watching a boxing match and somebody lays a good one on. You're like, wow, that was good. I mean, the tactics are fun to watch when you're not in them, but I'm still, I don't like it because this Rule 13, pick the target, freeze it, personalize it, polarize it. So you keep polarizing. There's no middle left. And so I said before, there's a little bit of a joke. If you have a friend with whom you can have a political argument, who has friends that you can do that with anymore? If you utter any opinion You'll get blocked on Facebook. You'll get canceled. You'll get labeled. You hate old people. You want people to die. I don't know. Pick whatever it is. There's no middle. It's all freeze, isolate, polarize, personalize. And I want to go back to McIntyre. He says, when you get to that situation, all you can do is win. There's no room for rationality. Or drop one more name. Dorothy Sayers. In the book, she says, people will complain that we're not very rational. We can't follow arguments. And they don't think that this might be by design. So we're not teaching the trivium. We're not teaching people how to learn. It doesn't seem to do you much good. Logic, actual logic, what's the point of that? In politics, who cares about logic? I don't like that nobody cares about logic. I want them to care because I think logic could actually get you to correct answers that lead to the common good. But if we keep polarizing, there's no room for that.
Me too. But it's just not the way it works, unfortunately.
Well, it would in Karl Veinotte.
Later on, after Rule 13, he says, the real action is the enemy's reaction. Like, what you do doesn't really matter. The only thing that matters is the enemy's reaction. I love that.
Well, by doing that, and like, again, Trump made Jeb Bush dance on the end of strings in that 2016 debate because he dictated the terms to know his enemy. He knew that once he kind of read that situation, he said, if I do this, if I push here, this guy will behave like this. Go watch the high five. If you want to see the saddest thing, a man destroyed, a man's life end, basically, a man's credibility end on national television. There's a part of the debate where after Trump is just prodding him with this low energy thing, he says, the moderator says, what would your Secret Service code name be? And Jeb Bush says something like, ever ready. It's high energy, Donald. Like, so he knows, he signals to millions of people that, you know what my head is filled with right now? Donald Trump.
Right.
There's nothing else in there but Donald Trump. And Donald Trump says that's good and reaches over to give him a high five. And Jeb Bush looks like the dumbest little kid high-fiving Donald Trump. And it was the sad, even if you hate Jeb Bush, this is a very, very sad thing to watch. The point that I'm trying to make
Should
is...
have left him hanging.
Know your enemy, right? If there's that, I think is one of the most important takeaways of this book is like know your enemy to start with, but also know how these tactics are going to influence your enemy. That puts it, people are, it's like with the name calling, like Pocahontas. People are always reacting to you if you're acting first. So you know your enemy, you know yourself, right? You know what your strengths and weaknesses are. You know what resources you have and what resources you don't. You know yourself. You know your enemy. And you know how to basically manipulate your enemy. And you know that after you do that, perception is everything. And men make people pick a side, right? I mean, that's this in a nutshell.
There's so much more. We're already at 2 hours and 38 minutes into this thing.
Don't say the time code on the show.
Okay, we are already.
I just got to edit it out because it's going to be.
You're right.
In the edit, it's going to be like 2:10.
We've already been at this for a long time.
Well, we're going to cut out some of Hambrick's tinfoil hat, aren't we?
Yeah, that's probably a good idea.
So it's like an hour 30 after that.
I'm right about all that. You guys that are listening, you're just going to have to guess what I was right about. He talks about using stockholder proxy votes for activism in the last part of the book, and he talks about how one might use the middle class, use those kinds of things to activate the middle class. And he's speculating. I think this is 72. Is that right? 1972, 1971? I can't.
71.
71. And I thought, well, this is very, very interesting. And then I put the book down and I was thinking about it some more. And I've been breezing through Carol Quigley's Tragedy and Hope yet again.
Ooh,
Brett
wow.
Veinotte.
Nice. Yeah.
And all the talk in the first 50 to 100 pages in Tragedy and Hope about these charitable foundations like the Rockefeller Foundation, Ford Foundation, and the Carnegie Foundation, and then the Koch brothers, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and so on, made me think, these people have already figured this out, that proxy activism They have already figured this out. These charitable trusts, in Tulsa, we have the George Kaiser Family Foundation, which is a criminal organization, as far as I can tell, for all you Tulsans listening in, hold enormous amounts of assets, from common stock and publicly traded companies to real estate and other assets, and they get a return off of that and blah, 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 blah. So these people, like John Rockefeller, he's been dead for 100 years, has been able to shore up his political influence and can be politically active for 100 years past his death by using shareholder activism, using the cash to manipulate the political system, to act as a extra governmental de facto department of the government. If you read that Tragedy and Hope book, you can see how from time to time the government has actually contacted the Rockefeller Foundation and asked them to conduct some studies that they weren't willing to conduct on their own, and then they refer to the Rockefeller studies and policy that they make in the future, blah, blah, blah. We see Bill Gates, he's all dumpy, and he's got metabolic syndrome, and he's over here lecturing us about health and public health stuff. And it's like, it didn't seem to go the way that Alinsky thought it would go. And then with the rise of the 401k and the exchange-traded mutual fund and the mutual fund market, most people in the middle class that own some sort of stock don't actually have access to their proxies without going to great efforts. If you own a little bit of stock, let's say you own some Walmart stock because you've got an S&P 500 index fund, you abrogate those voting proxies to Fidelity, let's say, that manages your exchange-traded fund, or the Vanguard company that, for Vipers, or, whatever it is. So that didn't happen. It didn't happen in the middle class like he had hoped it would. But I do think it happened on the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation level, the Koch brothers Foundation level, etc., the Harvard endowment level. How much stroke does the CalPERS, the California State Teachers Pension Fund, have with corporate policy, with the enormous number of proxies that CalPERS owns?
This is fascinating to me. So in Hambrookton, so in Carlvania, we wouldn't use these tactics. In Hambrookton, would the hedge fund be illegal?
Well, hedge fund's different than mutual fund.
Mutual funds.
No, I don't think so.
Even though it distances the voting rights of the shareholders, which... See, I was listening to you talk and thinking about how this is the haves winning.
Mm-hmm.
This is that
it is
quote from Podesta, which I certainly never read, about wanting a compliant population. If you're all in mutual funds, you don't care about individual governance of the companies that you have a stake in. You've gotten rid of all of that.
I have railed at length on index funds in particular because they are free riding. So it's not real investment, and you don't take any responsibility when you buy an index fund. You're just hoping to mirror the returns of the market, and then you're letting other people make good decisions, hopefully, about pricing, and then you just ride that wave.
I'm not really investing at all. I'm just buying a chunk of something that I hope will grow.
Right. It's just pure gamesmanship, and there's no responsibility as a consumer in that thing. I don't want to own this company because they have too much debt and they're risky. I would like to buy this one and reward that company by increasing the demand for the stock because they have low debt, they reliably create good products, they never get sued, etc. And so
if we did not have the mutual funds, let's go back to Alinsky, then what you could do is you could have everybody eat a bunch of beans and go to the shareholders meeting.
Yep.
And stink up the place.
Yep.
And that would be an influence that the have-nots, or the have-littles could have on the haves, which they don't have because they don't even think they own stock when they own their investment portfolio.
That you've convinced me, Karl. I am anti-mutual fund from this day and evermore.
Well, that was productive.
Well, I've already been like anti-index fund. And listen, guys, I already know the advantages. The chances of you beating the market are zero. So your best shot is to attempt to match the market return at the lowest potential cost. I understand all of why index funds, why there are good arguments for an individual person. But I made this argument earlier. If people only bought index funds, what would happen to price discovery? What would happen to corporate governance? It would collapse because people would only buy the S&P 500. There would be no demand for stocks that weren't on the S&P 500. There would be no pressure to maintain a reasonable price to earnings ratio and to pay dividends, because the only class of investor would be the person trying to ride the gamesmanship wave of the S&P. So I think if a behavior for an individual is writ large, and if everybody did it, it wouldn't work. I don't think that individuals should do it either. So I've already been against the index fund for those reasons. But almost every single one of those reasons carries over also to the mutual fund, though there is more shareholder activism in the mutual fund, and they're a little more transparent, and they can bring a little more pressure to bear for proper corporate governance.
This is why these sorts of things are fun to do, because we've just connected Alinsky with Hambrick, and it shed some light for me on finance. I hadn't thought about this, the proxy voting thing quite like that. That he's thinking it could be a powerful thing, but it's completely gone away.
Well, it's still a powerful thing, but the guy putting gas tanks in Impalas at the GM plant doesn't really have access to it like they once could have.
Yeah.
Actually, he does. Like, he could opt to buy individual stock issues and then do so, and then abrogate his proxy to Acorn or me. He could do that. But most people are looking at their retirement portfolio and they're just like, I need X percent and I got to save this much and I got to retire. And so they're not thinking about those proxies, and they're just not available. It's a big problem. If you look at the filings for any stock, you can see who the top shareholders are, and they're almost always going to be a handful of mutual funds and various pension funds and things like that. There are very few. You're not going to see a lot of individuals. It's Walmart. You're going to see the Walton family and the Robeson family and some stuff like that. But their largest shareholders are almost always institutional. You'll hear about, the institutional buying activity this week is blah, blah, blah. Well, what are the institutions going to do? Help institution. Fascinating book.
Yeah, I didn't hate it as much as I wanted to hate it. I wanted to hate it because, in the places in the internet that I hang out, Alinsky's name is a bad name. But the tactics are dynamite. I don't want to like them, but I want my people to use them. Is that fair?
Early on in the book, he references The Prince by Machiavelli, and he said it's a guidebook for how the haves hold power. Rules for Radicals is for how have-nots can take it away. Mm-hmm. So those are his intentions from the beginning.
Holy smoke!
And I think that's genuine.
It's an infuriating book. I think he's morally bankrupt.
Oh, totally nihilist. Yeah.
He likes brickbats and tearing stuff up and laughing at the rubble, it seems like. And maybe that's not generous of me, but I don't care. That's what I saw here. What he outlines here is pretty much the way things work. I don't think he invented anything. I think he discovered, codified, and learned how to teach what really works and what really happens to people.
That's it. Yep. I totally agree.
And make good arguments for why you should do this. I think there's a lot good in it because from time to time, very, very good people with very, very good intentions, not from time to time, always, there are very good people with very good intentions and very good hearts are the have-nots. And if you're the have-not, what are you going to do? There's one school of thought that says you strap on the dynamite vest and you walk into the pizza shop and you blow everybody up. There's a whole, in the Middle East, that stuff's been going on as long as I can remember and reading about that in the news, or the IRA, like you were talking about in the 70s and 80s, Karl, and before, for 300 years, I should say. That's one way to deal with being a have-not in a bad situation. And this way, as long as you're pumping the brakes a little bit, is better than that. I would rather people tried all of these Alinsky things before they put on the lone bomber vest and walked into a Subway sandwich shop.
Yeah. Remember, though, I think when we talked about like deconstruction, postmodernism, and small c communism, and a lot of the labels we apply to this, people don't write a book about tearing everything down. Not that there aren't, lots of problems with the way everything was at that time.
Mm-hmm.
But I'd say it's very rare that somebody takes on a project like this about deconstruction without having some kind of future construction project in mind. So
probably so. Well, he says that the price of success is a constructive alternative.
That's exactly it, and that's what I was thinking. When you're put into a position that you consider it's not an exciting thing to talk about, when somebody goes, "Okay, what would you do?" When that seems like a trap. I mean, it can be a trap, but if it's not a question you want to answer, or at least think about how you want to answer, yeah, what are you up to?
Yeah. He is a superb rhetorician. He's a superb propagandist. He's a superb pragmatist. And just like when I read the Bernays book, I don't trust a single word he says in here. I don't trust his intention. I don't think he's a person of goodwill. I'm sure that this book fits into his strategy in some way.
Yep.
And that my reaction to it is certainly what he hoped for.
Indeed. Thanks for having me, guys.
So much fun, Uncle Brett. I'm worn out.
That was a lot we just did, but I feel like we could do another 2 hours, but I also feel like we're not going to.
I can't. I can't.
Can't either.
Well, you know what? We'll probably cut this in 2.
Yeah, 2 would be good. Is a good number of shows.
We may cut this in 2. We may give you a big cliffhanger in the middle and come back and do it again. But I think we're going to cover Woodhouse's The Inimitable Jeeves after this one. And then Karl and I have been working on a schedule. I have a dream. I don't know if Karl concurs. He can veto this. But I have a dream of coming up with like the next 52 books and just publishing it as a list so our people can read along with us and get ahead. Maybe they don't want to read Woodhouse, but maybe they want to read the book after that. Well, they can look at the list and, get ahead a little bit and be ready for that show.
I fear certainty.
I kind of do too. Maybe we can just leave them hanging. Brett, I think we need to read Walter Lippmann's book, Public Opinion.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and maybe that's one that we could do for on your show or something. And then there's some John Rawls that I've been kicking the can on for about 15 years I need to read. I'm going to hold my nose the whole time.
Refresh my memory. What's he best known for? I know it.
The Veil of Ignorance. Justice is what you would pick if you did not know what your situation would be when the veil came up.
Mm-hmm.
Very influential. It's high-minded justification for progressivism.
Speech is tantamount to violence, and in fact is.
All right, now I understand where I've encountered him before.
And I like his ethical test. We'll talk about this on that show, but I kind of like the ethical test. If you don't have any idea who you are or what your situation is, make the decision, make the ethical decision, completely disinterested. And I kind of get that, but I understand that. Of course, he's trying to impeach ethical decisions that people in favorable positions would make. I don't know. I'm going to have trouble with that book. Anyway, there's like hours and hours of that. Thank you guys so much for listening. If you made it to the end, you're better than the people that quit before. So I appreciate you very, very much. Go to onlinegreatbooks.com/podcast and join our little mailing list. And we'll send you some goodies and get some messages from us and our newsletter and some white papers and all kinds of stuff. And we'll send you a discount when we open enrollment again. And then you may not know this, but Brett here of the School Sucks Project, he engineers and puts out our show, and it sounds good because Brett is good. And if you like the stuff we talk about, you'll probably like School Sucks Project. So go listen to his show and get a little kind of more of the same, but different.
Yeah.
Anything else?
That's it.
All right. Thank you guys so much for listening. We'll talk to you in 1 week.